She thought silence meant surrender. She believed that if she pulled back, acted distant, and gave you less, you'd panic. That you'd rush in, fill the gap with words, explanations, maybe even apologies, because that's what most men do when they're afraid to lose something they value. But you didn't. You didn't blow up her phone. You didn't ask, "Is everything okay?" You didn't write a paragraph trying to fix something she never truly explained. Instead, you stayed still. Not passive, powerful, and that's when everything shifted. At first, she called it arrogance, then coldness. Then she began questioning herself. Why wasn't he reacting? Doesn't he care? Why is he so calm? What she didn't understand was that you did care. Deeply. But you cared enough about yourself not to chase mixed signals. Not to beg for breadcrumbs, not to collapse your self-worth for temporary closeness. Your silence wasn't empty. It was full of dignity, of boundaries, self-respect. And while she tried to measure your love by how loud you'd get, you taught her something else entirely. Real men don't shout to be heard. They walk away, and their silence says everything. That's the moment she realized. You weren't playing a game. You were just done. It didn't start with a fight. No dramatic goodbye. No final word. Just a quiet shift, so small that most wouldn't notice, but you did. She began taking longer to respond. Her tone lost its softness. Her attention wasn't fully with you anymore. She was there, but not present. Laughing, but not listening. Smiling, but not feeling. Most men get pulled into that fog. They sense the change, and their first instinct is to fix it. To do more. To ask what's wrong. To chase her warmth like a man crawling back to a fire that no longer wants to burn. But not you. You saw the shift and didn't fight it. You didn't argue with her distance. You didn't beg for her presence. You accepted the energy she gave, and gave nothing more than what was deserved. That quiet decision unsettled her, because deep down, she expected resistance, a plea, a breakdown. She expected the version of you that needed her to feel whole, the man who would overgive too, feel seen, but instead, you became still. You didn't ghost her. You didn't punish her. You simply stopped overextending yourself for someone who had stopped showing up fully. And in that moment, you became something she wasn't ready for, unshakable. She realized she could no longer control the temperature of the room, because you were the fire now, and she was standing in its shadow. She didn't say, "I'm testing you." She didn't need to. It was in her tone, the way she slowly withdrew, the way her replies got shorter, the way she subtly delayed connection just to see how you'd react. This wasn't rejection. This was calculation. Would you notice? Would you panic? Would you chase harder? She needed to feel in control, and testing your emotional balance was her way of checking. How much power do I hold over him? Most men fail here, lean in harder. They become emotionally louder. They sense the ice forming, and they bring fire. Thinking it'll melt her back into warmth. But you didn't. You felt the test, and stayed composed. Not cold, just present, not detached. Just centered. You answered only what needed answering. You didn't chase what was retreating. You gave her space, not as a tactic, but as truth, because you knew real connection doesn't need to be chased. And love never asks a man to lose himself just to keep someone curious. So when she leaned back to see how far you'd follow, you didn't follow. You stood still, and in that stillness, she felt something she wasn't prepared for, the limits of her own game. It's not that you didn't care, it's that you didn't bite. And that silence, it's that pause. It echoed louder than any words could, because in refusing to react, you passed the test and broke the illusion. Beneath her distance was not confidence, but fear. She wasn't pulling away because she had better options. She was pulling away because she didn't know if she was enough. She could hold your interest without performing. She could be chosen without having to control. That's the part most men never see. They think she's losing interest, that she's found someone else, they've done something wrong. But in truth, her silence often hides a storm of self-doubt, fear of vulnerability, Fear of not being seen as valuable without effort. She needed to feel chased, not to feel loved, but to feel safe. Safe in the idea that she was still desirable, that she still had the upper hand. You, however, didn't offer that chase. Not because you didn't care, but because you saw the truth and didn't need to validate it. You saw that her test wasn't about you.
Oh.
It was about her trying to prove to herself that she could pull away and still be pulled toward. But you stayed still. You weren't angry. You weren't dismissive. You just didn't entertain a performance that had nothing to do with real connection. And that's what unnerved her, because she expected you to take the bait, to fall into the trap of proving your worth. Instead, you quietly honored it. Refusing to play, you revealed the very insecurity she was hiding behind. Now, your stillness wasn't just calm, it was a mirror. And what she saw in it wasn't rejection. It was reflection. Reflection of all the things she hadn't yet healed, and the man who didn't need to fix them to stay rooted in his worth. This is where many men fall apart. It's not because they're weak, but because they were never taught silence could be strong. She pulls back and they panic. They start sending long texts, over-explaining themselves, replaying old memories like a salesman, trying to convince a buyer who's already walked out the door. They think words will solve what presence once held. But every message, every can we talk, every I just want to understand chips away at their power. Not because caring is wrong, because desperation replaces dignity. You didn't go down that road. You didn't become her. It's emotional safety net just because. She felt distant. You saw the shift. You felt the tension. But instead of trying to erase it with noise, you leaned into the discomfort with stillness. No chasing. No explaining. No performance. Because a man who knows his value doesn't try to prove it. When it's questioned, that's the difference. You didn't break frame to win her back. You kept your ground even when it hurt, even when you missed her, even when your instincts screamed to fix what felt broken. Most men respond to emotional tension by becoming emotional themselves. But you responded with calm awareness, and that's what made you unforgettable. Because you didn't just say you had standards, you showed it in silence. You lived it in how you held yourself. You became a mirror she couldn't distort. And that clarity shook her more than any argument ever could. She never admitted it, but deep down, she didn't want you to beg. She didn't want you to chase. She wanted to feel your presence, even in absence. She wanted to know that if she pulled back, you wouldn't unravel. If she tested the waters, you wouldn't drown. She needed to see if you were a man. She could trust with her chaos, not one who'd be consumed by it. What she hoped quietly, silently, was that you'd stay grounded, that you'd hold your frame, not to punish her, but to protect yourself. Because if you had chased her while she was retreating, she would have lost respect. If you had pleaded while she stayed distant, she would have felt powerful, not connected. But you didn't do that. You didn't collapse under the weight of her emotional shifts. You didn't trade your masculinity for temporary closeness. You did what most men are too. Afraid to do, you stood still. And in doing so, you gave her exactly what she was subconsciously craving. A man who could handle the storm without losing his sky. She won't say it. She might not even understand it fully. But that silence you gave her, the calm, unbothered restraint, that was the very thing that made her feel seen in a way she didn't expect. Because for the first time, she didn't just feel desired, she felt safe. And not because you chased her, but because you didn't need to at first. She convinced herself it didn't matter, that your silence was nothing, that you were just doing your thing. She could pull back, stay quiet, and still be in control. But silence has a weight to it. And yours started to grow. What began as space has turned into distance. What began as stillness became presence. Every hour you didn't message, she noticed. Every day you didn't check in, she felt it. And slowly the attention she once took for granted became a haunting echo. She posted more, tried to look unbothered, louder in public, smiled brighter in pictures. But behind every filtered photo was a quiet question gnawing at her. Why isn't he reacting? That's when your silence flipped the script. You were no longer the one who needed clarity. She was. Because the moment a man stops seeking, he becomes sought. She started rereading your old texts, replaying your voice, wondering if she had misjudged your strength, your value, your presence. And with every unanswered notification, her certainty faded. She thought she was testing you, but she was the one being revealed, because silence doesn't just create space, it exposes truth. And in that quiet space you left behind, she saw herself. Not the version she projected, but the one who let go of a man who stayed calm while she searched for chaos. That silence wasn't a wall. It was a mirror, and for the first time, she wasn't sure she liked the reflection. Regret doesn't always arrive with tears. Sometimes it shows up in the middle of the night in silence so loud, keeps her awake. She scrolls back through your messages. Not just to read them, but to feel them. To remember what it was like when your energy still reached her. Now, all she sees is what she didn't value. Your patience, your stability, the calm way you loved. Without pressure at first, she thought your quiet exit was temporary, that you'd circle back like others had. But weeks passed. No messages, no I miss you, no BREADCRUMBS, only silence. And it broke her more than anger ever could because it meant something final. It meant that you didn't just disappear. You chose not to return, not out of spite, but out of growth. She thought she could test your limits, but you had already outgrown the game. Now she's left with a memory, not a man. And the worst part, you never slammed the door. You simply left it open and walked through it. No drama, no goodbye. Just a silence that spoke of self-respect she never expected, and now she knows. You weren't trying to be attractive. You were just being whole. You weren't proving a point. You were living a truth. And in the end, you weren't just attractive. You were unforgettable. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes he doesn't need to be louder to be heard. He doesn't need to chase love to feel worthy. And he doesn't need to explain himself to someone who only listens when he's begging. That moment is the beginning of power, not the kind that controls others, but the kind that anchors you to yourself. If you've ever felt the sting of someone pulling away, if you've ever felt the urge to fix what went quiet, and if you chose silence instead of chaos, stillness instead of noise, then you've already stepped into the rarest kind of strength. Not everyone will understand it. Not every woman will value it. But the right ones, the real ones, will feel it. And more importantly, you will feel it because silence, when chosen from a place of dignity, doesn't just protect your heart, it builds your identity. So if that's the man you're becoming, don't follow trends. Don't chase validation. Just keep walking. Quietly. Unapologetically, unforgettable. She didn't expect you to stay quiet, and that's exactly why. Well, she'll never forget you.